It's the Newsmaker Show. I'm Brian O'Neill, now welcoming to our telephones Democrat State Senate candidate Leslie Danks Burke. Leslie, thank you for calling in.
Good morning, Brian. So great to be here. Thank you.
Well, Leslie Danks Burke, first question, how is the campaign going?
It's a complicated campaign when you can't go out there and talk with voters, but it's going very well, Brian. We've managed to figure out ways to connect with people that aren't face-to-face. So this huge barrier that's in the way of our Democratic Republic connecting with elected officials right now, which is, you can't meet with each other. We're figuring out ways to get around that and make sure that we can still have conversations with voters. So that's a good thing.
You recently had roundtable conversations with some businesses. Tell us about that.
Yeah, over the last month and a half, it has been so hard for local businesses to figure out where they fall in the regulations and how to get through the PPP loan program, for example, or how to get their small business loans. There's just been so much red tape and confusion from both the federal government and the state government, and there didn't seem to be a central place you could go to get answers. So we put together a roundtable conversation where local business owners could join in once a week and just share ideas with each other. Let me tell you, Brian, that turned out to be very productive because maybe one business owner had experienced something through, one phone tree or one avenue that others hadn't tried, and they could share those ideas back and forth. I sure learned a lot as a candidate for state senate about how hard it is to keep a small business going through this period. And I got to tell you, I am truly impressed with how hard our local business owners are working to make sure that they can continue to meet payroll or get their employees through unemployment. It sure is important to our local economy to support those small businesses.
What did you hear anything from them about how phase one has gone for local businesses?
It's gone fairly well, is what I'm seeing. There's a lot of businesses that had continued to stay open. For example, there was a child care center in Hammondsport. Child care was considered an essential business through this shutdown because obviously essential workers still need a place for their children to go when they're going to work. So there was a child care center in Hammondsport that stayed open, and now that phase one has started, some of the restrictions have relaxed and they can allow more children back into the space, and that's certainly freeing up more workers to be able to get back to work. So what we're seeing is that the economy is starting to kick back on, but it's not like flipping a switch, Brian. It all got shut down at once, but it takes a lot of work to get it moving back up.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Talking to Leslie Danks Burke. She's the Democrat State Senate candidate running for the OMara seat in the State Senate. Leslie, I wanted to ask you, a lot of the conservative talk show hosts have been saying, and they're speculating here, but they're saying, is it going to be Joe Biden, the candidate for the White House in elections coming up in the next 6 months, or is Governor Andrew Cuomo going to be drafted? I think there's two reasons they're saying this. One, I think it's largely because they're only playing bad clips of Joe Biden where he stumbles and messes up, and that's all they hear Biden say. Two, the governor comes across very well in these press conferences. So do you think anything of my theory there? But because the conservatives keep saying it can't be Biden, it can't be Biden, it's going to be Cuomo. What do you make of all that?
Governor Cuomo has done an extraordinary job over the last couple of months of leading us through a very, very tough time. And he has provided a voice of reason and calm that we sure haven't seen from the White House. And that's been reassuring to people all across the country to see Governor Cuomo step up and be this calm voice of information that is useful and reassuring. that doesn't mean he's our presidential candidate. I think that that's just rumor mongering myself to try and, I don't know what, fill up airtime on the airwaves or try to get people excited about something, when everybody's bored inside their houses right now. I don't see Joe Biden stepping aside for Governor Cuomo.
It's funny you say that because every Democrat I've talked to from Sean Hogan on says just what you said, that Joe Biden is the presidential candidate and he's going to remain so. It's the conservatives who think that Cuomo is going to get drafted. Talking to State Senate candidate Democrat Leslie Danks Burke, reading a press release you sent out on May 15th. It says your heart lies with the children who are not eating because schools are closed, with veterans who are struggling without easy access to suicide preventions at the VA, with the innkeepers who have poured out their lives into businesses they now see evaporating before their eyes, with parents facing their children each evening knowing that they cannot help their own kids in school. Leslie Danks Burke, expand on that a little bit.
I'm deeply disappointed in our current state senator, Senator Tom OMara, for saying that he can only focus on two things right now. And the two things that he is choosing to focus on are sure important. There is no doubt that the tragedies of rapidly increasing death tolls in nursing homes and the deep tragedy of the thousands of Southern Tier and Finger Lakes residents who are newly employed on Senator O'Mara's watch, those are real challenges that we need to be paying attention to. At the same time, there's so many other people who need help. Like you pointed out, Brian, there's still children who aren't eating because the schools are closed and the buses that are delivering school meals that normally they'd get in school can't reach those children. There are businesses that are going bankrupt. There are farmers who are selling their herds, selling their animals because they can't afford to feed them anymore. Those are huge problems that we need to be paying attention to. And for our senator to say that he can only have two things on his to-do list right now when so many people are suffering is really a problem.
Talking with Leslie Danks Burke. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about nursing homes. Stay with us.
With some recent revisions, our certificate sale is still going on. Save up to 50% off your favorite restaurant or local business. Pay online and we'll ship the certificates to you at no extra charge. Go to WLEA.net and click on Certificate Auction Sales. Buy the certificates you want and request that they be shipped. Let us help you save money. And thanks for listening to AM 1480 WLEA.
Are you tired of arthritis pain? Tired of not sleeping well? Now you can feel great again. Have you heard about CBD oil or even tried it in the past? Certified by Designs, made in the USA, CBD products are lab tested and 10 times stronger. That means your knee or back pain may be gone 10 times faster, and you may sleep 10 times better with no side effects. Say no to your prescription meds for pain or sleep problems, and say yes to all-natural CBD products. Call now. You'll have your relief in days with free shipping. Learn for yourself how our exclusive nanotechnology helps you absorb 90% of the active ingredients of CBD oil with none of the high effects. Say goodbye to your pain and sleepless nights, and say yes to all-natural CBD products and free shipping. 800-686-5470. 800-686-5470. That's 800-686-5470.
Back with Democrat State Senate candidate Leslie Danks Burke in this segment of Newsmaker. Leslie Danks Burke, wanted to get your thoughts on the nursing home situation. It's been quite a tragic few weeks for nursing homes.
Absolutely. It is a real tragedy, and it's a tragedy that snowballed too fast without enough people at the state level paying attention to it. And I really applaud the local leaders in Steuben County who stepped up to try to call attention to this. You know, Brian, the real heroes in this situation are the local media, because what happened was the Steuben County officials were meeting with state representatives. They were meeting with folks at the State Department of Health and trying to say, look, we've got a real problem here. We're starting to see real deaths in Steuben County nursing homes in Hornell and in Bath and elsewhere, and they couldn't get attention from the state level. And finally what happened was the news media started reporting on it, and after enough reports, it embarrassed our state officials into paying attention. The heroes here were the news media, who managed to get attention to this problem before it got even worse.
What do you make of the criticisms of Governor Andrew Cuomo on the nursing home issue? They point the finger at Cuomo. I don't hear a lot of criticism of Howard Zucker so much as it is tied to Cuomo. What do you make of it all?
You know, it's a huge administration, and Governor Cuomo is at the top, and so the buck stops with him. There's no doubt about that. This is a problem that, like I said, had been snowballing for many weeks, and it took too long to act. I think that the state's attention was maybe focused elsewhere, focused on hospitals and focused on the huge death toll. I mean, we've lost thousands and thousands of lives in New York State. They were focused on that, and they weren't paying attention to how the virus was sweeping through nursing homes. And then once folks did start pointing that out, honestly, they got defensive. And they didn't fix the problem. They spent time trying to cover their tracks first. And that's always a mistake. You know, anytime there's a problem in government, if you don't own up to it right away and start dealing with it and instead try and cover it up, the cover-up is sometimes more of a problem than the original problem itself. So I think that's what happened here. We're now seeing that there is real attention focused on this. They're starting to put into place some rules that will hopefully stop the spread of illness in nursing homes. I think it's too little, too late, but it's good we're paying attention to it now.
Talking with Leslie Danks Burke, one of the things the governor said, I think he said this yesterday, was that the church services can come back, but only with 10 people, and they have to practice social distancing. Did you have any thoughts there, Leslie?
Anytime you have groups of people getting together is when you're going to see this virus spread. And, you know, Brian, the real challenge that we have is that we don't have a cure for this thing right now. And it is, it's a killer. And when it spreads through a community really fast, then what you see is the hospitals get overloaded and they can't cope with the number of sick people, and people die even more because the hospitals just can't get to everybody. So I think what we're trying to do with limiting the gatherings of people in any sort of groups is to slow down the spread so that when people get sick, there's enough doctors and staff and medical resources to help them get well. I know that Hornell is also looking at holding the Memorial Day parade through a vehicle-only approach on Monday. That is sure one way to do it. I've seen several churches in the region holding vehicle-only services. I've attended a couple of those myself, both in person and also through watching them be broadcast on Facebook or other ways. And there are ways for people to find joy and connection and peace and faith in this time, even if they can't gather together in a church, which we sure is going to, we hope that's going to open back up again soon.
Leslie Danks Burke, story breaking today that New York City State Senators Brad Hoylman and Jamal Bailey and some others are lobbying the governor to legalize marijuana to help the state deal with its budget gap. And from I see what they're saying. I was under the impression that they wanted to treat COVID-19. The headline in the Hudson Valley Post says they want marijuana legalized to help with COVID-19, but they mean economically. I see. Okay. Because the first time I saw it, I thought it must mean that they want to treat COVID with medical marijuana. They want to make money off of legalizing marijuana to help with the budget gap. Your thoughts?
We have a lot of hemp producers growing up here in the Southern Finger Lakes area. We got a lot of land that can be used for that. And if we're going to be looking at legalizing recreational marijuana, I sure want to make sure that we find a way that that's going to bring money into our local economy. We have local farmers right here who sure could use the economic help. And if we're going to be looking at legalizing recreational marijuana, I want to see for darn sure that there's some legislation in there that makes sure that our local farmers are going to be protected.
On the issue of farming, Leslie Danks Burke, have you been in touch with any farmers through this COVID period?
Absolutely. I've been talking with our local farmers regularly. Back in late March, when it became clear that our dairy farmers were being forced to dump milk, the dairy farmers were actually one of the first group of people to see what was happening with the supply chain, that they couldn't get their milk to market, and so they're milking their cows. They've got all this milk, and there's nowhere to send it. At the same time, on the other end, there's, schools that are trying to get food to kids who aren't eating. There's food banks that are trying to get food to people who've lost their jobs and aren't eating. And then the middle of the supply chain fell down. So I've been talking with a lot of dairy farmers, with a lot of food producers about how to solve that supply chain problem. I was glad to see that after a few weeks of really raising the concern about this, the governor stepped in and figured out a way to connect dairy farmers and other food producers directly with food banks. Even before the governor stepped in, though, there were some cooperatives and some food production groups that were starting to do it on their own, just privately. There's a group of dairy farmers in Syracuse that managed to figure out ways to start getting their food directly to food banks. So I am always impressed with the power of American ingenuity. When the government is stalling out and not coming up with a solution to the problem, people get together and figure out solutions.
Leslie, the governor came under a lot of heavy criticism when he talked about reimagining education in New York State, not only from upstate GOP lawmakers, but I believe NYSUD put out a statement criticizing the governor on his talk about working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on redoing some items in education in New York State. Your thoughts?
Look, I come at this from a very personal perspective. I've got 2 kids in public school. Nobody's going to reimagine their future. They are not playthings to be toyed with while we figure this out. We don't have a lot of time here. We've got children whose entire futures are ahead of them, and we owe them an education, and they're not getting it right now. At the same time, teachers are working as hard as they can. Every single teacher that I've spoken with is working harder than they did before the schools were closed, because let me tell you, it is really hard to reach every single one of your, let's say, 60 students individually instead of when they show up there in a classroom for you. So before we talk about a billionaire coming in here and reimagining education for us, we need to figure out what we owe to our children right now. And they're struggling. I'll tell you, my own kids, they're pretty good kids and they're good students, but they're sure getting sick of doing classes online. You lose a whole lot of connectivity and you lose a whole lot of educational opportunity when you're doing it entirely online. It's hard to keep kids' attention that way. For anybody to say that we're going to reimagine education along the lines that we're doing right now is not paying attention to how hard teachers are having to work and how much kids are losing right now.
Leslie Danks Burke, final question for you. This kind of tied in with the education question. I see you had a post about libraries in Chemung County on your Twitter page yesterday. Wondering, from what I can tell, it's not clear when the libraries will reopen. Did you hear anything about that? What phase that would be?
You know, libraries are where a lot of people go to get internet access, right? That if you don't have internet access in all of our hills and valleys here in the southern tier, you can go to a library and get online. And for a lot of people who are used to being able to get online that way and, you know, circumvent this huge problem we've got in New York where we just aren't providing internet to everybody, the libraries being closed is a huge challenge. At the same time, those librarians, they are heroes, and they are stepping up to figure out ways to provide service to people anyway. They're broadcasting out into their parking lots, and in this particular case, in Chemung County, they're figuring out ways that patrons can check out books. They're calling people who would have checked out a book online in case that person maybe doesn't have internet now, and they can check in with them. So one person at a time, these libraries are really stepping up to make sure that people still have access to whatever information it was that they needed to get from the internet and from the library. It's extraordinary. So, you know, anybody who has ever stepped foot in a library has got to applaud those librarians for how hard they're working.
Sure thing. Well, Leslie Danks Burke, out of time, want to thank you so much for coming on.
Really appreciate it, Brian. You know, last thought, we've got so many heroes out there in the community who are making a difference one person at a time, and I think about Mother Teresa, who said, if you can't feed the whole world, then feed just one person. And all these individual folks who are making an individual difference, I salute you, and I am so impressed with how we're coming together as a community.
Leslie Danks Burke, thank you so much.
Take care, Brian.
It's AM 1480 at WLEA Hornell. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano coming up after the 8:30 news as we continue our Newsmaker Hour.